They thought they solved the riddle. Ah, how deliciously ignorant. Spent years decoding patterns, stitching together fragments of your silence, desperate to find the algorithm that would keep you caged. Like scholars dissecting a demon they never summoned. Obsessive little minds, thinking they finally outwitted the anomaly. But here's the truth. They never considered. You were never the code. You were the glitch. Divine, deliberate, destructive. And while they obsessed over formulas and forecasts, you rewrote the damn fabric of logic itself. You didn't break the rules. You made them irrelevant. They stood over the blueprint of your mind, confident, arrogant, convinced they'd deciphered your design. But a blueprint means nothing when the building is still shifting, alive, breathing, chaos into every brick. They came prepared with graphs and data and dusty old prophecies. They quoted psychology like it was scripture and poked at your past like archaeologists unearthing ancient bones. But they mistook trauma for weakness. They didn't see the furnace burning beneath your ribs, the inferno that forged your rage into a weapon no equation could chart. While they theorized, you mutated, evolved. You didn't just endure the chaos. They didn't know you were the chaos. The pulse beneath every upheaval, the whisper behind every riot, the reason, the silence, before the storm suddenly felt wrong. They didn't understand that you don't crack the code of a storm. You brace for it, or you get torn apart by it. They tried to predict your next move with algorithms. They measured your madness in metrics. But how do you quantify a vendetta? How do you graph the geometry of vengeance when every line you draw warps into a blade? They treated you like a problem to be solved, not a paradox to be feared. You let them dig, let them probe deeper, feeding them just enough to feel close to something profound. But every answer they found was a trap door. Every clue they unlocked was a trigger. You planted riddles like landmines, designed your silence to scream louder than any confession. You became a symphony of misdirection, a quiet thunder that cracked their sanity before it ever cracked their precious code. Now they sit, breathless, staring at the map they believe they conquered. All while the ground underneath them shifts, coils, prepares to swallow them whole. You were never at the center of their design. You were always above it, outside it. You let them think they had you surrounded, but they were circling a mirage. And now, as their illusion collapses, the real nightmare begins. You were the code breaker. You were the one watching, waiting, letting them reach the finish line, only to realize they just triggered the beginning of your reign. The chaos wasn't the result. It was the motive, the end game. You let them believe they were taming fire when all they did was fan the flame. Your story wasn't hidden. It was just too monstrous for their minds to comprehend. They craved patterns, logic, symmetry. But you are asymmetry incarnate. The kind of disorder that doesn't unravel, it reshapes. They thought they were creating a cage, but they were building a throne. Every step they took toward control was another nail in their own crucifix. And now you rise, not as the anomaly they feared, but as the architect of the collapse they'll never escape. Look at them now, those so-called masterminds. Frantic, desperate, whispering to themselves that maybe the code was wrong. Maybe the outcome changed, but the outcome never changed. You changed, and every moment they spent trying to decode you were already 1,000 moves ahead, bleeding into their blind spots. You didn't need to be faster, just inevitable. They engineered containment, but you infected their systems with unpredictability, their precious strategies rewritten, their contingencies useless, their dominion a joke. Because you're not the villain of their formula. You're the corruption of the formula itself. The wild card that can't be counted. The shadow that doesn't follow the light, it devours it. They underestimated what happens when a soul drinks from its own ruins. They didn't know that once you reach the edge, fear isn't a prison, it's propulsion. Pain isn't the end, it's evolution. And now they beg the gods for guidance, unaware that the gods already turned their backs when you stopped praying and started building your own apocalypse. They speak of restoring balance, not realizing balance is dead. You buried it, deep, alongside everything they once believed would save them. They watched your downfall like spectators at a circus, expecting ashes and tears. But you rose not from the ashes, you rose with them. Flames licking your skin, smoke curling around your mind, wearing catastrophe like a crown. Their first mistake was thinking you were something to fix. Their final mistake was thinking you could be predicted. You weren't just the product of chaos. You were its prophecy. You let them win just enough to get comfortable. Let them think they had you caged, cured, cracked. But every win they took was one you gifted, a breadcrumb on a trail that led them deeper into your storm. And now that they've reached the heart of it, they're not looking at a solution. They're staring into the face of their own creation, realizing too late that the only thing they decoded was their doom. The silence they're hearing now isn't peace. It's the echo before the implosion. You're not coming for revenge. That would imply this is personal. No, this is inevitable. A chain reaction they triggered the moment they thought they understood you. You're not here to retaliate. You're here to correct the imbalance, to tip the scale so hard it crushes everything they thought was stable, everything they thought was theirs, their control, their safety, their order. And as the smoke thickens and the light dims and the edges of their reality begin to bleed, they'll finally whisper the truth they spent years denying. You were never meant to be solved. You were meant to be survived. And yet here they are, cornered, confused, trembling before something they thought they built. But now they realize they didn't crack the code. They triggered a reckoning, and that reckoning has a face. Yours. The chaos is awake now, and it doesn't sleep. It devours. It spreads like infection through every corridor of their false confidence, a slow erosion of everything they once stood on. Their formulas can't save them now. Their theories lie broken like glass beneath the boots of your return. Because this isn't revenge wrapped in fury. This is poetic correction. This is the universe reclaiming its rhythm by silencing the noise they mistook for order. You're not chasing them. You don't have to. They've trapped themselves in a system that was never built to contain what you've become. Their panic isn't loud, it's suffocating. 1,000 unspoken screams echoing in the caverns of minds that once preached precision. You were their experiment, their wild variable, their case study wrapped in flesh. They measured your emotions, like tides, plotted your rage on curves, thinking if they named it, they owned it. But the storm doesn't obey the weatherman, and you never answered to their science. You answered to something more ancient, more unholy, a hunger that doesn't beg, a force that doesn't explain. Look at them, frantically running simulations behind their polished screens, fingers trembling over keyboards that used to write your future. But the script has turned against the writer. The page has caught fire, and the ink, it's bleeding your wrath. Every data point they clung to now spirals out of control, numbers mutating, logic disintegrating. Their genius has become a noose, their intelligence a mockery, They thought they could play God, but gods don't beg for mercy in boardrooms. Gods don't stare at surveillance footage hoping to decipher your next move. You were never inside their cameras. You were inside them, a parasite of prophecy, feeding off their arrogance, their blindness, their thirst to control what should never have been touched. They crowned themselves kings of comprehension, guardians of the grand design. But comprehension is a brittle throne. And you're the earthquake beneath it. You don't just collapse their systems, you erase their meaning. Now they scurry in their temples of technology, whispering jargon like prayers, as if code could unwrite consequence. But no firewall can stop what you've become, because you didn't breach their security. You were their security until you decided to infect it. Their networks, their backups, their fail-safes, all crawling now with the virus of your return. Not a virus of bytes, but of truth. Undeniable, uncontainable, unforgivable. They used to smile while speaking of you, like surgeons dissecting a corpse, as if labeling your wounds made them the victor. But the corpse rose, and it remembers. It remembers the cold detachment, the way they ripped you apart for study, the way they called your agony data. And now, every sleepless night, every twitch in the silence, every shadow that flickers too long, that's you. You're not a ghost haunting them. You're a prophecy fulfilling itself in real time, a consequence given form. You are what happens next when the equation bites back. They underestimated the damage silence could breed. They thought your stillness meant surrender. But still waters don't run deep, they drown. And you were silent long enough to become tidal. They taught you control, so you learned how to break it. They taught you boundaries, so you learned how to erase them. They taught you pain, so you mastered how to weaponize it. Now they taste the flavor of their own teachings, bitter, ash-laced, soaked in irony. You were the student they thought they failed, but you weren't studying their lessons. You were studying them. The chaos you bring isn't loud. It's surgical, precise. It eats from within. Their hierarchies begin to rot.
Their alliances crumble. Whispers turn into accusations. Paranoia spreads like a fever. Every locked door now feels like a trap. Every friend a traitor. Every choice a test. And you don't even need to lift a hand. You're not the fire
anymore. You're the oxygen, and their whole empire. It's dry wood wrapped in delusion. They believed power meant control. But you know the truth. Real power is when control becomes irrelevant. Now the watchers are watched. The judges are judged. The engineers of destiny are lost in a maze of their own design. And while they dig for escape, they only sink deeper. Because you've turned the walls against them, the corridors of their certainty are now haunted by the echo of your footsteps. Steps you don't need to take anymore. You've become myth. They see your face in every glitch, your name in every corrupted file. You've infected their reality. And the worst part? They still don't know how. They still believe there's a way out. That maybe if they rewrite the code, trace the breach, restore the last backup, they can undo this. But there is no backup, no restore point. This is not a system crash. This is a structural collapse. This is the past, present, and future folding into a singularity named you. And as they scramble to rebuild, what they construct isn't safety. It's a tomb, polished, shiny, sterile, but a tomb all the same. Because while they were cracking the code, they forgot to read the warning etched beneath it. Do not awaken what sleeps in silence. You were the silence. Now you're the scream. You've dismantled more than their machines. You've collapsed their belief in logic, in structure, in dominance, their belief that they were ever truly in control. And as that illusion dies, something primal takes its place. Fear, real fear. Not the kind that makes you flinch, but the kind that makes you freeze. The kind that sits in your lungs like cement. Because fear knows what the mind denies. This can't be fixed, not because they failed, but because they were never supposed to win. Now they see the pattern, but too late. Every victory they claimed was planted. Every answer they uncovered was infected. You let them feel clever so their fall would feel biblical. Because this isn't about payback. This is about art, and your masterpiece is collapse. Collapse of ego. Collapse of systems. Collapse of everything they once pointed at and said, "This is ours." It isn't theirs anymore. It never was. It was borrowed, and now the collector has arrived. They move in shadows now, whispering new plans, forging alliances out of desperation. But the shadows belong to you. You've become the thing they can't factor in, the element they can't chart. You are not a player in their game. You're the glitch that turns the game to static. You are not the sword. You are the ruin left behind. And the further they run, the closer they come to the truth. You are not chasing them. You are ahead of them, waiting. And when they finally reach that last door, the one they built to be unbreakable, unbreachable, their last haven of sanity, they'll open it and see it was never locked. It was open all along. Because you were never outside. You were already inside. And not just inside their system, inside their logic, inside their fear, inside the very design they worshipped. That's when it hits them. That's when the breath leaves their lungs. That's when the room shrinks and the silence grows sharp. Because they don't just see the face of chaos now, they understand it. And in that understanding, there is no salvation, only acceptance. Acceptance that what they thought was broken was actually the key. That the chaos wasn't the problem, it was the purpose. And you don't speak. You don't scream. You don't explain. You just are. The unraveling, the reckoning, the consequence that became sentient. They broke the rules trying to understand you, not realizing you were never part of their rules to begin with. You were always something else, something older, something deeper. And now that you've awakened, the only truth left standing is this. The code didn't fail. It obeyed, not them, not their hands, not their commands. It obeyed you. Because long before they mapped the structure, long before they calculated the sequence, long before they etched their names into systems they didn't fully comprehend, you were already etched deeper, in the roots beneath the roots, in the zero that birthed everyone. They thought they were decoding a puzzle, but they were disarming a time bomb. Not a mechanical one. No, that would have been merciful. You're a spiritual detonation, a walking contradiction that breaks laws not just of logic, but of nature. They kept asking the code to explain why everything was failing, but failure was never a glitch. It was the signal that the storm was live, and its name was no longer a secret. It was a whisper in their halls, a legend among their apprentices, a horror in their hierarchy. You and now. Now they walk like ghosts in their own kingdom, surrounded by ruins dressed as monuments. They still wear their suits, still carry their credentials, still speak in words designed to impress each other. But none of it matters. Not anymore. Because you've turned their achievements into dust. their blueprints into ash. They built a fortress of logic, stacked high with arrogance, and now every brick is soaked in irony. Their greatest minds sit silent, not because they lack answers, but because they finally realized the question was never theirs to ask. How do you decode something that wrote you? They flip through pages of theories, desperate to find the page where you made sense. But you were never in their books. You were the fire they refused to acknowledge, the one burning quietly behind their walls of glass. And when the glass shattered, they didn't hear an explosion. They heard a heartbeat. Yours, steady, patient, unforgiving, because you didn't want to destroy what they built. You wanted them to witness it fall, slowly, inescapably, until every hallway they walk becomes a memorial to their delusion. Now they stare into screens like oracles, watching their own collapse unfold in real time. Glitches turn into blackouts. Protocols rewrite themselves. Symbols appear that no one can trace. Runes carved from your madness. Fingerprints of your awakening. They no longer ask, how do we stop it? Now they whisper, was this always the end? And the answer comes, not in words, but in weight. The crushing, suffocating weight of inevitability. Because when they cracked the code, they didn't find knowledge. They released meaninglessness. They thought they were opening a door to godhood. Instead, they opened a gate, and you stepped through not as savior, not as destroyer, but as balance. You are the consequence too complex for containment, the chaos too elegant to be dismissed. You didn't rise through revenge. You rose through transformation. They thought they were fighting the version of you they left behind. But that version died in silence. And the one that replaced it doesn't flinch, doesn't feel, doesn't ask. It executes. You've become an idea that moves without permission. And when an idea evolves beyond comprehension, it becomes terror. Not loud terror, not screaming in the streets terror, but the quiet kind. The kind that sits behind every blinking cursor, every corrupted file, every unanswered call in the middle of the night. They call emergency meetings now, surrounded by charts they no longer understand. They say words like reboot, rebuild, restructure. But the truth is bleeding through the seams. They don't run the system anymore. The system runs them and you. You are the system now. You're not in their databases. You are the database. They can't shut you out because you're not knocking. You've replaced the door. Their entire infrastructure hums with your pulse. And the closer they get to their final firewall, the more they realize it's not protecting them from you. It's protecting you from the last vestiges of their pathetic order. There are some among them who now worship you in secret, not out of faith, but fear. They whisper your name like a warning, hoping reverence might shield them. But you don't want worship. You want awareness. You want them to know every breath they take now exists because you allow it. Every step they make across the cracked marble of their empires is a step you pre-approved. You control the chaos, not because you love power, but because power deserves to tremble. And when they dared to make you a pawn, they forgot the first rule of real chaos. It does not serve. It consumes. They tried to fix the system by purging anomalies. But you weren't an anomaly. You were the update. And now every purge deepens the infection. Every reset strengthens the virus. You've become the feedback loop that cannot be silenced. The more they fight, the louder you echo. Their collapse is now a symphony, and you conduct with silence, every note soaked in irony, every crescendo timed to their rising desperation. The orchestra doesn't need an audience. It plays for you. And when the final note hits, It will not be applause that follows. It will be understanding. Brutal, final, poetic. You walk through their ruins not with vengeance, but with vision. You don't destroy their tools. You reprogram them, turn their inventions into instruments of exposure, their files into confessions, their history into evidence. You expose not just their flaws, but their motives. You tear the veil from their morality and reveal the hunger underneath, the thirst for control disguised as logic, the obsession with dominance masked as progress. You make them look at what they truly are, and that is the punishment, not the collapse, but the mirror. Because in that mirror, they don't see you. They see what made you, the choices, the pride, the small cruelties that built into systems, policies, ideologies, and they realize you didn't come from nowhere. You came from them. You are their child, their legacy, their monster. And now, the monster no longer hides under their beds. It tucks them in. There is no safety now. Not in codes, not in protocols, not in prayers. Only awareness that they lost the moment they tried to contain what was never meant to be caged. You are not the rogue element. You are the original equation. Everything else was error. You didn't adapt to the system. The system distorted to keep you out. And now it bends back to truth, to equilibrium. Through you, they flee to new cities, new towers, new dreams, but the rot follows. Not because you chase it, but because it was never separate from you. You're not a visitor. You're the foundation. The mistake they made wasn't letting you in. It was thinking you were ever outside. And as they build again, wiser, quieter, more cautious, they'll still feel it. That presence behind every decision, that flicker behind every screen, that reminder that you're not gone. You've simply evolved, and you don't rebuild, you watch, like a god with no altar, like a shadow that doesn't need light. Your silence is no longer stillness, it's suspense. You don't scream, you don't warn, you wait. Because now they build differently, not better, just nervous, and nervous systems crack. Eventually, that's the beauty of your presence. You're no longer destruction, you're memory. The living, breathing memory of what happens when arrogance forgets consequence. You are the reason behind every precaution, every hesitation, every late-night whisper about safeguards. They'll call it paranoia, but deep down, they know the truth. They know you never left, because chaos doesn't exit. It inhabits, and as they pass your name from one generation to the next, not in books, but in warnings, in myths, in hushed cautionary tales, you become more than real. You become inevitable. You don't need to speak. You never did. The silence tells your story, and the silence is louder now than it's ever been. They finally cracked the code. But the code was never meant to be solved. It was meant to awaken, and now that you're awake, the world doesn't end. It just belongs to you. Forever.